Anybody excited about this wonderful, shiny new thing that came up on May 25th, 2018? G, D, P, R. Anybody? Oh! Get some people who are really excited. Now, here's a question for you. Who honestly believes, and this is a safe place, so you can share, who honestly believes that this is a total waste of time? GDPR and all of that. I would say, okay, I'll take that. I would say 40 to 45% or so. That's interesting because I will try to convince you that GDPR is the best thing in the world and make you fall in love with it. So maybe later when we have an opportunity to tattoo things, you will be able to tattoo GDPR on your shoulder. It's unlikely that it's going to happen, but you know, I really want to look into things that are maybe not as exciting as most of the things we covered at this conference. This has been a really strange year for me, because I committed to doing two things consistently. Starting from January 1st, every time somebody would send me a link to a new service or a new tool or anything, I would go to extremes to read the privacy policy in all its entirety on a Sunday. That was no fun, right? Anybody read privacy policy in full extent? Maybe 4 people. Right, okay. The other thing that I decided to do, every time I get to see a pop-up, this wonderful cookie pop-up showing up at the bottom, right, I'm going to go to extremes to opt out from every single tracker. Anybody did that? Yeah, some people do, some people do. That was no fun either. Not because I'm a masochist or so, but just because I wanted to find out how difficult this experience can be and what we can learn from it. And I want to kind of show a couple of things that we need to know as designers and developers in my journey of understanding GDPR, trying to make sense of GDPR, and the collection of data so we can actually learn something from it in our projects. One thing first, though, I do not take any responsibility for all the horrible things that you're going to see in this session that might have a tremendous influence on the way you design and develop and build and debug and deploy and refactor and all of that. I'm not liable, right? Just saying. Now, with all of this in mind, privacy, right? Now, this has been a really interesting year for me because I was really trying to explore, to understand what the GDPR thing means and where it comes from and what it actually means for us as designers and developers. And I was interviewing students in the age between 15 to 25 in Netherlands and also in Ukraine and also in Russia and also in Germany, and I was actually quite shocked. I was very sad and very shocked because the way I used to grow up with the web is very different from the experience that people, in this age had, because they don't like the web the way we do, right? Because this is what the web has become for many people. This is not very exciting. Nobody comes to the page like this being super excited about clicking away all these wonderful buttons and all these wonderful, pop-ups and stuff, right? And it's literally everywhere. And it's even worse than that, because most interfaces are just extremely disrespectful. Imagine you want to buy a ticket to go to a cinema. This is a very normal thing to do. So what do? Well, you go to a website to buy a ticket, and you're greeted with a wonderful pop-up with a video which doesn't play. And so you click it away, of course, because who wants to see this kind of thing? And it opens in a new tab. How wonderful is that? And then you come back thinking, this must be a mistake, right? You click again, and it opens in another tab. Because why not? And eventually, if you do want to buy it, well, this is a wonderful prompt you're going to see as a warning before you actually give somebody the money. Imagine going to a cashier in a grocery store, and just before you buy, you're getting, please read this and this and this and this and this before giving us the money. It's just ridiculous. And very often, these interfaces are just extremely disrespectful, right? Now, this is an application form from a bank. And in that bank, there is a question asked in German, do you have children? Right? And there must be a designer or developer both sitting somewhere in front of Sketch or Photoshop or just in HTML CSS thinking, do you have children? Slider. It has to be a slider. And the thing about slider, it has a minimum value and a maximum value. The minimum is 0, that's kind of obvious, but the maximum has to be defined, and luckily developers have defined the maximum because it's 5. But if you happen to have 6 children, then you have a way out because you can click on the pencil icon. And then this thing turns into an input field which you can adjust and edit, and you can say 7, but the interface will tell you, no, 5, right? This is how wonderful things have become, and it's just really just disrespectful in so many ways. And then there are wonderful, websites like this. This is not going to be nice, so if you don't like insects or bugs, please close your eyes now. And it's everywhere. It's all over the place. And we're laughing about this, but this is really a horrible state of things. This is a kind of a service or website that allows you to choose a tool with which you want to kill bugs in your home, right? And I can almost sense the designers or developers or product managers having this discussion. Let's add a little bit of red here. Let's change the drop shadow. Let's choose the color pick. And then the best part, how often do you see a bug on a slider? That's just incredible, right? And then you have to answer a couple of questions. We have the bugs invaded and things like that. And then you end up with an ultimate solution for all your problems, which ironically is the only solution they have on the site, right? And this is just really surprising. And then there is companies that are just evil, evil companies. And I'm like an elephant. I'm like an elephant. I never forget. I never forget. So Ryanair has redesigned and all of that. But whenever you were booking a flight on Ryanair in the past, insurance would add it in for you automatically unless you know how to opt out. But to opt out, you need to know how to opt out, because opting out feature is conveniently placed between Denmark and Finland in country selector. Right? And we're all laughing about this, but this is a really, really, really incredibly disrespectful. And when we're thinking about this, it's just, we think about our customers being our users, and our users do not deserve as much respect as human beings do, I guess. So we ended up with all these interfaces being all over the place. And of course, there are tons of bad patterns, and we really took it to extremes. This is one from Instagram recently. You can book anything, you can place an ad on Instagram. And so what people found out is, whenever you have a display ad, people do not like to have hair on the phone or dirt on the phone. So this is a hair photoshopped onto the ad to prompt clicks. How convenient that is. And then somebody said, we can do better, much better. Let's just plug some dirt, right? Let's just plug some dirt, and clicks increased, and conversion increased, and every single thing that people want to increase, increased. And it also shows up in very different contexts as well. Push notifications. Who doesn't like a good push notification, right? And this is an incredibly just disrespectful way of treating customers, right? And I'm wondering, if this text must have been A/B tested as well, because later they changed it to something that's much more convenient, right? Which is just unbelievable. But very often, these things which we find on the web every now and again, they're hidden. So when you see this happening, right, you see a little bubble, the red bubble, which really plays on our psychology in a way of us trying to remove it. I've never been to watch section at all, but we see this indicator tricking us into getting there. Very much like we can find it on all the other sites, like Booking.com, for example, right? And if we look in detail into what's happening there is just a JSON which with the JavaScript randomly combining names and dates and product images just to mimic this notion of somebody buying at this point right now. Right? And this is just something that's happening pretty much consistently everywhere. And so when I started looking into the privacy policies, right? Wow, this is such a fantastic material to read on Friday night. This is unbelievable. One of them is F-Secure, which is something like a Wi-Fi setup tool. And there, when you sign up, you agree to assign your firstborn child to them for the duration of eternity. Right? That was exciting. That was interesting. Anybody using Amazon Web Services? Did you read the privacy policy and terms and conditions of Amazon Web Services? Because if you do, you'll find out that if you scroll long enough and fast enough, and you go all the way to section 57.10, which is going to take a while, so I'm not going to do that, you'll find a wonderful zombie apocalypse clause, which says that the restriction will not apply in the event of the occurrence of a widespread viral infection transmitted by bites of contact with bodily fluid that causes human corpus to reanimate and seek to consume living human flesh, blood, brain, and nerve tissue, and is likely to result in the fall of organized civilization. Now, why does it exist? Because one of the tools that they're building is an engine for building games, and in that game, you can actually build zombies, but if somebody decides to use the zombie for apocalypse, they will not be liable. Right? Oh, that's very convenient as well. What really fascinates me, though, is that every time I get this kind of apps sent over to me, anybody used Face app? Did you read the privacy policy behind Face app? right? You know what really freaks me out a little bit? And please don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who is installing a Tor client and trying to use all kind of possible extensions to block things. But the scope and the dimensions that the tracking has gained are unbelievable. It really surprises me how come that all these applications that show up have a pretty, average interface. You can do what you need to do, but they always go to extremes, creating hundreds of pages of privacy policies. Because if you look into FaceApp's terms and conditions, not only do they have rights for all the images that you're uploading, they can also use them in any way they like on any product they're going to develop later in their lifetime. Right? And these are the rights that we're giving to them just by using the service. And more than that, they also place a device identifier. They can deliver information to third parties and fourth parties and so on and so forth. So if you have a conversation with your customers or with your clients or with your colleagues about a particular tool or service that you might want to use, of course, reading all of that is a lot of work. But there is a wonderful service, Terms of Service didn't read, right? Which kind of beautifully collects everything that you probably need to know about a particular service or about a particular tool, what's happening with the data, and especially in light of GDPR, you kind of need to know what is going to happen to your data. So this is a really, really useful resource to keep in mind. But at the same time, it goes much, much deeper. When you start digging, you discover all kinds of things. Especially when you realize that YouTube is serving ads with CPU-draining cryptocurrency. Right? You're watching a video, and at the time as you're watching the video, cryptocurrency is being mined for you. Not for you, actually, for somebody else, but on your machine. So we started fighting back. We started fighting back with things like ad blockers. Who is using an ad blocker? Yes, I thought for a long time that I'm just like you, right? It's just me. You're using a Facebook blocker and tracking blocker and all of those things. But this is not reality at all, because actually ad blockers are becoming a mainstream thing, right? And this, of course, is a big problem for publishers, but it's a much bigger problem for people who really, or companies that really want to track you, right? And there is a war going on, a big war. Like, for example, on Facebook. Every day, they introduce random classes and spans inside of divs, just to write down the sponsored text, because otherwise it's going to be blocked. Right? And sometimes you would write it using Canvas, for example, just to make sure it cannot be tracked by regular ad blockers. And I remember vividly the times when ad companies were trying to file a suit against AdBlock Plus, trying to make it illegal. Right? And they lost. But as a result, there were a couple of tools showing up, like this one, which actually stop ad blocking on your site now. And I remember vividly, when this showed up, just a day later, there was an anti-ad block killer, which was blocking ad blockers, right? And then, of course, a couple of days later, there was a blocker for the anti-ad blockers, right? And this is a war that's kind of been going on forever now, right? And of course, some of you will say, well, we're using ad blockers, we're fine, right? You have to be careful what ad blockers you're using. If you're using Ghostery, it might not be a good idea, because they're known for helping ad industry understand and realize what kind of ads are being blocked and reported to ad industry, so they know how to kind of work around that, right? Have to be very careful. At the same time, all these tools like Facebook Container and Stop Chat pop-ups, right? The newcomer this year, and even better, Track This, which opens 100 tabs of pure madness to fool trackers into thinking you're somebody else, right? So you end up, using Instagram and you get some personalized advertising. If you want to totally screw it, you just pick one of the, profiles you'd like to adopt, right? And they will be totally ruined, right? And this is kind of fun in a way. But if you really start kind of digging deeper to understand what the user behavior is, this is where we landed at this point, 2019, right? Whenever somebody encounters a pop-up or modal, blocked. Push notifications, blocked. Chat window pop-ups, mostly blocked. Install app prompts, blocked. Importing context, oh, we know how it was with LinkedIn. Well, all of a sudden, all of our friends get spammed about the service we just started using. No way. Importing context, no way. Video autoplay, block. Geolocation permission, without understanding why, no way. GDPR, okay. Yeah, whatever, I have nothing to hide, just cookies, not a big deal. Advertising banners blocked. Oh, this is a fun one. Whenever somebody asks you to turn off an ad blocker, there are two established strategies to work around that. Because we're really good at working around, we will not allow them to tell us what to do. We're better than that. So whenever you get this wonderful message saying turn off an ad blocker, when some people go into incognito mode or private window. Who does that? Okay. And some people have a second browser which is specifically dedicated for things like that. Who does that? Some people as well. So turning off a net blocker, it happens actually quite rarely. Whenever somebody wants access to camera photos, blocked, microphone blocked as well. Oh, this is a fun one, email input. Imagine you are at an airport and you can sign into Wi-Fi to get free Wi-Fi, and there are 4 options to sign in with, right? Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and email, right? Who would pick Instagram to sign in? No, we won't let them in. Instagram is our thing, it's our darling, it's very special. No, not Instagram. Who would choose Facebook to sign in? Maybe 10, 12 people. Okay, who would use Twitter to sign in? Maybe 4 people. Who would use email to sign in? Now, what kind of email would that be? Because we have 2 kind of levels of emails. We have the good email. We won't give them the good email, right? And there is a fancy email. That's like, for me, it's always marcus@gmail.com. Poor Marcus, by the way, right? Always gets wonderful notifications, accounts, newsletters, all kind of crap, really. And I would love, if you're working at the airport, I would love to see this database. It's full of creativity, full of creative emails that never existed, probably, right? So it's really hard. It's really, really hard to get proper email from anybody. The same goes for somebody like pushing your newsletter box. Or, capture, well, what can we do with capture, right? And there is this notion that's been very established somehow, the notion of I have nothing to hide, so what? I'm just a regular person. And there's not much private information I have to, hide, so there's no problem. The thing is, it's not about hiding something. It's about protecting something that belongs to you and that isn't anybody else's business. Because your data might land anywhere. Like, for example, right now, this year has been a big year of menstrual surveillance, where all these applications tracking pregnancy, for example, collect data, and they're allowed to collect data because you signed up for terms and conditions, right? And they gladly sell this data to the best bidder. It might be your manager, it might be your colleagues, it doesn't matter, but this data is gladly collected and can also be sold. And it's not just, pregnancy apps. Would you like your health insurance to know how often you go to, let's say, to a gym? Or like what you eat? This is not their business. This has nothing to do with them. So this information should not be in their hands. Anybody had this feeling at some point? You may be talking to somebody, and all of a sudden, maybe 5 minutes later, maybe a day later, you realize that, that thing that you spoke about shows up on Instagram. Anybody had this experience? So, well, this is not paranoia. This is actually happening on a regular basis, and there are approximately 1,000 signals being sent, audio fragments being sent to Facebook servers, Instagram servers, and so on, without you even controlling it. So it's probably a good idea to disable microphone just for Instagram or Facebook and so on, because by default, it is kind of actually allowed, right? And so it's just a starting point, because once you get really deeper into this, some horrible things show up. And I'm going to show you a video of what will be happening and what is kind of happening, and it's a popular thing that's been used quite a lot. Can we play audio, please?
Articles presented to a pre-chosen.
Let me just start again.
The Spinner is a new online service that enables one to control articles presented to a pre-chosen specific individual on the websites he or she usually visits in order to subconsciously seed a message in their minds. That person, the target, is exposed to hundreds of items strategically placed as editorial content, repeating the same message over and over and over again. Whether it is propose marriage, quit smoking, initiate sex, or stop riding motorcycles. How does it work? The basic package offers a set of 10 different articles presented to the target 180 times over a 3-month period. The articles, along with their eye-catching headlines, are chosen by a group of psychologists in order to influence the target on a subconscious level. The Spinner sends you an innocent-looking link. The link is sent to the target via text message. When the target presses the link, a cookie connected to the link attaches itself to the target's phone. From this point, the target will be strategically bombarded with articles and media specified for him or her. The story of The Spinner was covered by Rolling Stone, Financial Times, New York Post, The Sun, and many others. Alongside popular preset campaigns, The Spinner also offers tailor-made campaigns. The most requested tailor-made campaign is Settle Outside of Court, which has now been added as a preset campaign, and Get Back with Your Ex. If you're interested in a campaign tailor-made for your specific messages and goals, go to www.thespinner.net.
How nice is that, huh? And it costs just $49. $49. This is so creepy. And we're living in the world where this is perfectly normal. How did we end up here? So when we look into things like GDPR, right? This is not about having something to hide. There are real problems, like you don't want your manager to find out that you're looking for a job before you found a job, right? You don't want somebody you want to propose to find out about your plans before you actually buy the engagement ring, right? All those things are kind of really out there, and we're not even thinking because we think, oh, we have nothing to hide. This is a very, very dangerous statement to have. So what is the solution then? Well, GDPR is maybe one of them, but it's just a starting point, really. GDPR is not coming out of nowhere. Actually, there was a 1995 law, which was actually been around for quite some time, and there's nothing fancy about that. And then it was evolved. And GDPR is kind of the evolution of that law that was actually passed in 1995. And it's all about protecting data. This is kind of what it's all about. And it's a wonderful reading material for Sunday night after reading all the terms and conditions. I'm certain about that, right? And the interesting thing about that is that it really deals with the way we treat data in a respectful, simple and respectful way. All this cookie pop-ups that we see is not actually really what this GDPR thing was supposed to be about. It's all about having really clear control about what is going to happen to your data, right? And this data refers to pretty much everything, including genetic data, biometric data, online identifiers, and so on and so forth. Right? But it goes also for IP addresses, mobile devices IDs, MAC addresses, cookies, telemetry, user account IDs, and so on and so forth. And I'm not going to go into detail about what GDPR is, of course, I'm sure you know that, but it all boils down to one simple principle, is that privacy has to be proactive, not reactive. It's available by default, and we can ruin it. Very much like accessibility. It's just available by default unless we ruin it. And so we should treat privacy as a default setting. And all of that means for us as developers pretty much this. Sorry for all these letters on the slide, but this is essentially everything we need to do, or we need to know. That privacy and security are default. The coding standards must be preventive, so whenever you get something like a dangerous module that you're importing, you need to be looking into things like, is it secure at all? Can we actually use it or not? APIs and third parties as well. For core functionality, you don't even need cookie consent at all. No unnecessary data might be collected by default, and every time you require data, you actually need to ask for permission. And very often we actually think about, oh, okay, we have this site, let's add a cookie pop-up, just having the right to collect this data. And it's kind of a wrong way of thinking about it, because by default, privacy should be there. And whenever you need something, you will ask for it, right? And it really worries me sometimes. You go to the page and you get this wall of text, give us everything, or walk away, right? Well, if you do want to alienate your people or your customers, then it's probably a good way of doing that, right? But if you actually want to get these permissions, you have to ask progressively. For example, very much like building up trust first. You come to the site for the first time, maybe you don't collect any data at all. And then as you keep going through maybe 2 articles, 3 articles on a news website, you can show maybe we could get permission to set a cookie for marketing. And then maybe a few articles later, you could ask for something like geolocation permission. And maybe a few articles later for something else. You cannot walk away with just having a wall, because this is, first of all, not GDPR compliant, and second of all, you will not get the result that you actually want. Now, the interesting part about all of this is that it's done in a horrendous way most of the time. We look in New York Times, it doesn't matter where you click on this pop-up. It just doesn't matter. You click on the cross, you click on the accept, or you just keep using the site, it's considered as consent. There is no such thing as silent consent according to GDPR. Right? It has to be proactive. And so in that case, whenever you look at the bottom, by clicking I accept or X on this banner or using our site, you consent to the use of cookies unless you have disabled them. Right? Now, this is not GDPR compliant in any way. And it's been very interesting for me to see what has been done in that regard. So this is my favorite example ever. Cookie settings, and all the marks, all the boxes are unchecked, but then the button says select all and confirm. Oh, that's nice, right? And then even better one, here cookies necessary is marked, which is, again, GDPR compliant. Only necessary cookies can be marked by default. And then you end up with analytical target advertising, and the button saying, allow all cookies. So once you click on it, everything gets selected, and then you actually saved your settings, right? And there are ways of dealing with it better. For example, one thing that's been kind of quite popular is, again, that you have a choice. You always need to have a choice going to GDPR. So here you have a choice to adjust the cookie settings or approve. And once you selected it, you group all the cookies in groups, and then you can select what you want to support and what not. A more convenient way would be to do something like this with a slider, right? Where you have essentially, you're explaining what is going to happen to your data, why you're going to need these cookies, and what functionality will be allowed and which functionality will not be allowed once you actually allow or disallow the use of these cookies, right? And it's been quite interesting because there was a grace period, right, when everybody could implement GDPR, and then nothing, no like law courts, anything would happen. But just over the last years, there were 95,000 complaints filed for GDPR violations all over the world. So if we look into Poland, for example, where here we had an online retailer which was filed for failing to protect the data collected from 2.2 million customers, right, just by saving them in plain text, like all the data. In Sweden here, there was a school which was actually where the complaint was filed for using facial recognition without asking for permission first. And the cases go on and on and on. And I'm not trying to warn you and say, oh, well, look at all these lawsuits. You don't want to be a target of that. But the problem with that is that every time we need to make a decision about how we're going to build certain things, right, we need to think about what it means for our customers and where privacy and security fit into place. And these cookies are actually just the first starting point, right? Because if we look around, what we'll find out that most of the time, this experience is actually really, really bad. The usual experience that we get, right? The new one, which is also something that's going to be, that's kind of propagated by the second half of the new privacy directive, which is called the EPrivacy Directive, is a different way of asking permission. By default, nothing is collected. And if the customer allows to collect something, well, then you're going to get this pop-up, right? And the best part about it is that the other proposal that's happening right now as an evolution of GDPR, very much like we evolved JavaScript and CSS actually, is the fact that this setting for I want to share this data with my websites is going to be implemented in browsers on the browser level. I'm running out of time, I guess. Browsers in the browser level, so whenever you update your browser, right, you can adjust the settings saying, I'm okay with sharing my data for marketing purposes or not. And this is going to be advertised as a do not track header to websites and web applications, and then it will be our responsibility to actually respect that. And I've been in really strange conversations lately. Really weird. If we think about lawyers and doctors, right, whenever we think about lawyers, in order to become a lawyer, you need to go to school, you need to get your license, you need to study law, and then you need to go and practice, right? The same goes for doctors. And so there's been some legislation in the US especially about, well, shouldn't web designers and developers, go to school, get a license, practice, and become professionals, and only then design and develop? Because if you think about all the responsibility we have, right, when developing Facebook and developing all the other applications, this is quite tremendous and quite impactful for the community around us. Right? And so this is just a starting point. If we look at things that are happening beyond that, what do we need to keep in mind then? Well, one common way of how companies deal with it is the fact that they move away from the notion of just collecting data about A/B tests to something that's much broader than that. We're looking at something like a healthy business metrics mix, where we're looking at conversion, but also long-term gain. Person who is coming and sees a pop-up, I'm just finishing. Promise. Person who is coming just sees a pop-up is not going to stay for a long time, right? And so there is a big mix of different things that we're kind of looking at, from time to first share, time to first purchase, time to first upgrade, and so on and so forth. And also things like turnaround score. A person who is disappointed kind of becoming excited about the product again. And I want to finish just with one final thing. It doesn't matter what we do. There are many things that we have to do right. Not because it's an ethical thing, but because it's just better for us as developers as well. Now, what does it mean? Well, the thing means I really want to see more applications like this with us.
You might wonder how blind people deal with everyday challenges. Well, normally the answer is simple. We're not that different from you. We play music, We go to school. We go to work. You get the picture. But sometimes the simplest things can be difficult, and we need a pair of eyes.
Connect to.
First available helper.
That's where you come in.
Establishing video connection.
Through your smartphone, Be My Eyes connects the blind with sighted people through a live video connection. Simply choose if you need help or want to help by the click of a button.
That's a nice picture of you and your family, Caroline. Is it for a present? Yes, it's a photo from my parents.
You can help just by installing the Be My Eyes app,
Gripped image.
and we'll notify you when someone needs your help. And if you're in the middle of something, don't worry. Someone else will step in. So, would you care to be my eyes?
You know, when I look at apps like this, right? So whenever we don't respect privacy, not because we don't want to, but because somebody tells us to do so, or because marketing or anything of that kind, we're putting people who are most vulnerable, who might not see that pop-up, right? They might not know what is going to happen to the data in real danger, right? And this is really something we cannot afford, I think, right? And I wanted to share something that's really kind of important to me. I know that privacy is very difficult to make exciting, to be honest, but it's something that we kind of can do just to protect ourselves. And I feel like this was very important to kind of understand the scope of data collection. No, we have nothing to hide, of course we don't, right? But it's really important that we protect what belongs to us and is not everybody else's business. When I talk to somebody, I want to talk with that person and not with Facebook or somebody else listening at the same time. Just one more video? Yes? Because it's a little bit sad. It's really hard to make things right, but we can try. And this has been the story of my life for a couple of years now. It's a little bit sad, but it's also fun. So the best part is we can try and make the best out of what we have, because the world is unsatisfying. For designers, thanks to Parallel Studio for the video. And with this in mind, cats, and more cats, and meow, and thank you so much for your attention.